My husband surprised me one day by saying he wanted to use the $1 million I inherited to renovate our family home. He said with a grin. I was stunned, barely able to speak. My father had passed away, leaving me the inheritance, but I hadn't told my husband about it. I'd been considering divorcing him because he was too controlling, and I didn't want him knowing about the money since he was always greedy for it. But how did he find out? When I asked him, he confessed to threatening my mother to spill the secret. I couldn't believe his audacity. I fumed as I'd argued with my husband, but he just smirked and said, "Doesn't matter what you think. The deal's done. Your yelling won't change a thing." Now, I'm Caroline, 28 years old, working at a big bank. Always wanted to tie the knot, but my busy job didn't leave much time for dating. So I took a chance and signed up with a matchmaking agency. That's where I met Robert, a cheerful delivery driver a year older than me. In my line of work, I hardly meet any women. Meeting someone like you, Caroline, is like hitting the jackpot, Robert said, blushing. I feel the same way. It's wonderful to hear you say that, I replied. Would you go out with me? With marriage in mind, Robert popped the question. I said yes, and our love story began smoothly. We tied the knot 3 years back. At first, I thought we were a loving pair. I made more money than Robert, but he always praised me, saying, Caroline, you're amazing, such a career woman. But 3 years into our marriage, Robert's attitude changed. He started with sarcastic jabs like, must be nice, earning that big salary. And it wasn't just him. My once friendly in-laws turned cold. They used to be so sweet. Caroline, working at a major bank is impressive. You must have worked hard. We're thrilled our son married you, they'd say. Thanks. I'm lucky to have Robert, I'd reply. We're looking forward to having a great relationship with you, my mother-in-law would say, with a warm smile. At first, both my in-laws seemed so supportive, looking at us with loving eyes. Though issues with mothers-in-law are often talked about, I never thought it would concern me. But soon enough, their true colors showed. Caroline, you make good money, right? Give us some. I want a designer bag. It's not a big deal to help us out once in a while, my mother-in-law demanded, as if it were expected. But I just got you a dress for your birthday recently, and I don't lend or borrow money, even within family, I replied. They were furious when I refused. How dare you? We only agreed to this marriage because you work at a big bank. Truth is, we can't stand you. Sick of you always speaking your mind so clearly, my mother-in-law shouted. Exactly. What's the point of a daughter-in-law who won't give us money? Giving gifts for birthdays is expected. We're telling you to hand over cash. Even after we've asked so many times, you still won't give in. You're the worst daughter-in-law, my father-in-law scolded, backing up his wife. Robert simply nodded along with his parents' harsh words and didn't stand up for me. To add to that, he often splurged on takeout and expensive furniture without consulting me, saying, you make good money, so this should be fine. It wouldn't have been a problem if he used his own earnings, but his salary couldn't cover it all, leaving me to foot the bill. With the constant mistreatment from Robert and his parents, divorce started seeming like the only way out. Since we didn't have kids yet, I felt the decision wasn't as complicated, so I began preparing for the divorce. When I brought up the topic to Robert, he'd avoided it and refused to confront the situation. Divorce? I'm too tired today. I'm going to bed. He'd brush it off. Wait, Robert. We need to seriously discuss this today, I'd insist. But he'd ignore me and quickly retreat to the bedroom, persistently avoiding the conversation. I got a call from my mom during that time. Hi, Mom. What's going on? Listen carefully. It's about your dad. According to her, a recent checkup revealed that my father was sick and needed urgent hospitalization. Got it. I'll head to the hospital right away, I said, rushing to prepare. As I was getting ready to leave, Robert asked where I was going, and I explained about my dad's situation. But he just replied with a nonchalant Disappointed by Robert's lack of concern, especially considering it was about his father-in-law, I focused on going to the hospital without paying him any more mind. When I got there, I joined my mom to hear the doctor's diagnosis. Turns out my dad had cancer, and his time was limited. Both Mom and I were stunned. We debated whether to tell him the truth about his condition, but knowing he'd want to be fully informed, we decided to be honest with him. Returning home devastated, I was met with Robert's insensitive question, "Back from your dad's hospital, huh? How bad is it?" Despite my anger at his tone, I shared the grim news about my father. His response was callous. "Oh, weren't you talking about divorce? If you want to stress out your already ailing father with our divorce, I'm up for it any time." His despicable comment plummeted my feelings for him even lower. But I didn't want to burden my father further. Despite Robert's smug claims about being ready for divorce, whenever we discussed it, he seemed even more pleased. With my workload and a desire to avoid divorce discussions, I focused on being there for my father. Avoiding the topic of divorce seemed like a victory to Robert, worsening his attitude. "So, what about your dad's inheritance? How much are we talking about? I'm his son-in-law, so I should get a share, right? Can't wait?" Robert asked eagerly. "That's ridiculous. My dad is still alive. How can you even bring that up? Shut up. Don't raise your voice at me." No matter how much I objected, Robert seemed unaffected. His constant speculation about what he might get after my father's passing disgusted me. So, I started staying at my parents' house. I told my mom that I'd be staying there for a while since it was closer to the hospital. After some time, my father passed away after his battle with illness. He left this world peacefully, as if he were asleep. My mom and I cried so much it felt like we'd run out of tears. But with funeral arrangements to be made, we couldn't dwell in our sorrow. I called Robert to inform him about my father's passing and the funeral date. Although I still wanted a divorce, I felt obligated to let him know since we were technically still married. "So, your dad finally passed away. Sorry for your loss. I don't feel like attending the funeral. Too much of a hassle," he said casually. Despite my suspicions, Robert showed no signs of sadness. I had hoped he would at least come to the funeral, but it seemed even that was asking too much. Seeing his indifference, I not only lost any remaining feelings for him, but began to detest him. I regretted marrying a man who concealed such a cruel side. "Do whatever you want," I replied, surprised by my own coldness. "Why are you so upset?" "Oh, and I'm curious about the inheritance," Robert taunted. Unable to bear his mocking laughter, I cut him off and ended the call. In the end, Robert didn't show up for my father's funeral. Some called him heartless, but I believed it was for the best that he stayed away and didn't tarnish my father's final farewell. In truth, I felt relieved he didn't attend. After the funeral, a family meeting was arranged, including my mother and me, to discuss the inheritance. There were talks about who would receive what, but since my father had made decisions before his passing, everything was settled smoothly. Feeling like I had finally found some closure, I decided to head back home. But as soon as Robert saw me, he dropped a bombshell. "Hey, it's been a while. I've decided to use the $1 million you inherited to renovate the family house." "What?" I was so taken aback that my voice faltered. I hadn't discussed the inheritance situation with Robert. How did he know about the $1 million? And why was he planning to spend it on home renovations? Still reeling from the shock, I asked Robert, "What do you mean? I have no idea about any large sum of money." With a chuckle, Robert responded, "I had a chat with your mom. I may have nudged her a bit, hinting that if she didn't spill the beans about the inheritance, I might consider divorce. She quickly spilled everything. It turned out that Robert had coerced my mother into revealing details about the inheritance. You're despicable, threatening my mother like that just to find out. That's a low blow," I exclaimed, my voice rising without me even realizing it. "I don't care. The renovations are already underway with that $1,000,000. You did what?" "Yep, lucky me for snagging that cash." "Good thing we're still hitched," Robert retorted smugly. While I was preoccupied with funeral arrangements and other tasks, Robert had already arranged for the renovations using the inheritance. I was speechless. You're obsolete now, but I'm feeling generous. You have two options: move in with my folks or file for divorce. Robert's smirk was downright repulsive. I sighed deeply and replied calmly, I choose divorce, but I won't regret it. Robert laughed dismissively, as if I'd regret anything. With that, he handed me a lawyer's business card. From now on, we'll handle everything through this lawyer. And don't forget to transfer the inheritance to my account, he added. Silently, I packed my belongings and left. Even as I walked out the door, Robert kept reminding me, don't forget about the inheritance. When I recounted everything to my mother, she seemed taken aback. She hadn't realized how strained things were between Robert and me. She also apologized for divulging details about the inheritance to Robert. It's all right, Mom. I should have told you everything, but Robert threatening you is the worst part. I reassured her, then asked if I could stay at our family home until I found a new place. She readily agreed. The following day, my phone buzzed incessantly with calls from Robert, all of which I ignored. Eventually, Robert showed up at my parents' house, ringing the doorbell persistently and causing a commotion. Despite my attempts to ignore him, Robert refused to leave and continued to shout loudly outside. Hey, open the door. I know you're in there. Feeling overwhelmed by his aggressive behavior, my mother suggested, Caroline, maybe you should talk to him to prevent any further disturbance for the neighbors. It might not lead to anything productive, but if things escalate, we'll call the police. All right, I understand, I replied reluctantly. With Robert showing no signs of leaving, I reluctantly opened the door partially, leaving the security chain latched. This is getting out of hand, Caroline. When are you transferring that $1 million? I can't afford the renovations without it, Robert shouted, attempting to shake the door and break the chain. Remaining calm, I responded to Robert. It's under consideration. Confused by my reply, Robert looked puzzled and asked, What do you mean, under consideration? I confronted him with the truth, saying, What I inherited was my father's vacation house. It's not in cash, so I can't transfer it to you. Robert's eyes widened in shock. But then, I had something that surprised me too. How did you manage to secure a $1 million renovation contract? Usually, they wouldn't agree without proof of funds. Well, I have a relative who owns a construction company. I mentioned I'd be receiving $1 million soon, so they skipped the usual checks, Robert explained, looking stunned. If that's the case, remember when I warned you before we decided to divorce? I reminded him. I did warn you properly. You've got to be kidding me. I already paid a deposit of $3,000. I planned to pay the rest in installments, but now I can't. What am I supposed to do? Robert panicked, continuing to fuss. The wife's property is the husband's too, right? Even if it's not in cash, hand over that $1 million vacation home. We're still married, right? You've got it all wrong, Robert. Inherited property isn't shared, it's solely mine. Not a cent goes to you. And just so we're clear, we're not a couple anymore. We're total strangers, I asserted firmly. Upon hearing this, Robert's expression shifted from despair to rage, his face turning beet red as he began screaming louder than ever. Stop playing games. I'm calling off the divorce. Give me the inheritance right now, he demanded, attempting to grab me through the door gap. Witnessing the altercation, my mother swiftly dialed the police. Robert withdrew his arm upon hearing her on the phone, but then smirked unexpectedly. I'm done with you, he sneered before fleeing the scene. After he left, the police arrived. While the doorbell camera footage seemed to suggest action would be taken, the officers advised me to prioritize my safety and to avoid engaging with Robert in the future, regardless of the circumstances. They instructed me to keep the doors locked and, if necessary, pretend I wasn't home. 3 days later, I received another call from the police regarding the documentation concerning my father's real estate. When I returned to my parents' house after divorcing Robert, I had put the real estate documents in my bag, only to discover they had vanished. Upon being informed that the documents were found, I headed to the police station where Robert was unexpectedly present. To my shock, It turned out that Robert was the thief who stole the documents. As I demanded an explanation, exasperated, Robert wore a sullen expression and muttered, "You thought there might be cash in my bag since I inherited $1 million, right? So when you went through my stuff, you stumbled upon some important-looking documents related to the inheritance and decided to take them." Robert explained that he hadn't examined the documents closely at the time. It was only after learning from me that the $1 million wasn't in cash, but a vacation house that he realized the documents he took were the property title of that house. Later, Robert, assuming that selling the property title would convert the inheritance into cash, took it to a real estate agent, accompanied by my in-laws, to initiate the selling process. However, upon my arrival, the realtor informed me that since the title was still in my father's name, they couldn't proceed with the sale. As the inheritance division discussion had just taken place, I was in the process of finding a notary to transfer the title to my name. Even if the inheritance had been finalized, the property would still be under my name, making it difficult for Robert to sell it without my consent. In frustration, I demanded that they purchase the property since it belonged to my father-in-law. Their response was to call the police on me, likely due to Robert's aggressive behavior, which raised suspicion among the employees. As I stood in shock, Robert began making absurd claims to the police officer. "I was just trying to sell it on her behalf. I didn't steal anything. I haven't done anything wrong. Please let me go," he pleaded, contradicting his earlier admission of taking the documents. Remaining composed, I clarified to the officer, "That's not true. I didn't ask him to sell anything. He stole it on his own. Plus, the documents he took were just copies, not the originals. Even if he tried, he couldn't have sold them." "You set me up. Don't play games with me," Robert shouted furiously, spitting in anger. I responded icily, "What are you even talking about? You stole on your own, and now all you do is spout nonsense. Just face the consequences of your criminal actions." Frustrated, Robert bit his lip, and as a result, he was arrested for theft. With news of Robert's arrest and the loss of the $3,000 deposit broadcasted, my in-laws, now exposed as the parents of a criminal, were compelled to relocate from their town. Later, they seemed to hold a grudge against the real estate agency that reported Robert, resorting to making harassing calls and spreading rumors. The real estate agency, understandably outraged, filed a lawsuit against them for obstructing business and attempted fraud, as they had tried to sell property they didn't own. To avoid a court case, my in-laws had to pay a significant amount in damages. In their desperation, they reached out to me for help. "Caroline, please. We used up our savings for the deposit, and now we're in debt to pay the settlement." My ex-mother-in-law's voice trembled with urgency, but I felt no sympathy. "Why are you asking me for help? I'm divorced from Robert, and as far as I'm concerned, you're strangers to me now." I responded firmly. She pleaded, "You're wealthy, aren't you? Can't you spare some money? We'll pay you back, I promise." "I don't believe that for a second. I'm ending this call. Don't contact me again," I replied coldly, before hanging up and blocking both their numbers. Robert's number had been blocked long ago. Knowing Robert knew where my parents lived, I decided to sell our family home and moved with my mother for safety. As for the $1 million vacation house, I put it back on the market, and it sold without any issues. Now my mother and I live peacefully, cherishing the memories of my father.
My ex-husband, who thought I was infertile, left me 15 years ago. When he ran into me and saw my son, he trembled. That chance encounter was just the beginning of a tumultuous journey where old secrets resurface and hidden truths come to light, challenging everything he believed about the past, present, and future. Hey there, folks. I'm Linda, and welcome to Linda's Stories channel. I hope you're all ready for a good tale. So picture this. It's a sunny afternoon, and there's Catherine sitting by herself at a restaurant table by the window. She's gazing outside, enjoying the lovely day, waiting for the waiter to bring her lunch. Little did she know, a surprising encounter was just around the corner. As Catherine headed to the bathroom, she accidentally bumped into a boy walking down the hallway. She said sorry right away, but when she glanced at the man with the boy, She was shocked to see someone from her past. It was Michelle, Catherine's ex-husband, whom she hadn't seen in 15 years since they divorced. Feeling a bit surprised by the unexpected meeting, Catherine felt a mix of surprise and discomfort as he came closer. However, she stayed composed and greeted him politely. Michelle and Catherine had always dreamed of having children. From the start of their marriage, they tried hard to make that dream come true, but it just didn't happen. Years passed, and they still couldn't conceive. Catherine started to worry that something might be wrong and suggested they see a doctor together to figure it out and maybe try some treatments. But Michelle, being stubborn, refused to go. He came from a big family and thought the problem must be with Catherine, considering his own family's fertility history compared to hers, as she was an only child. Using their family backgrounds as evidence, he started blaming her for being infertile, which only made things worse between them. Eventually, their frustrations and misunderstandings grew so much that they ended up getting divorced. Despite the scars from their past, Catherine decided to greet Michelle politely, recognizing that time had passed since they last met. However, her warm attitude was met with coldness and disdain from Michelle. "Are you alone?" "Still single, I see," he said arrogantly, his eyes reflecting superiority and indifference towards Catherine. With a gesture implying his supposed superiority, he introduced the young man beside him. "This is my son, Austin," he announced proudly, as if it were a personal accomplishment. "He's a real genius, just like my new wife, Sophie," he added, nodding towards a woman at another table, a hint of pride in his voice as he talked about his new family. Catherine was astonished by Michelle's arrogance. She had hoped that after so many years, things might have changed between them, but his behavior showed otherwise. It was clear that he was still as proud as ever. However, little did Michelle know, something was about to happen that would shake up his entire family's destiny and change the course of his own history forever. As they talked, a tall and caring young boy approached Catherine. Seeing the concern on her face, the boy, with a protective instinct, asked, "Is everything all right, Mom?" Catherine's face lit up at the sight of her son, and she replied warmly, "Yes, everything's fine, my dear. I'm happy you're here. I ran into someone from the past while waiting for you." She gave her son a loving kiss on the cheek, appreciating his care. "I want you to meet my son, Michelle," Catherine continued, smiling as she noticed the surprise on Michelle's face. "This is Nathan." Michelle couldn't conceal his surprise upon discovering that Catherine had a son. His eyes widened, reflecting a whirlwind of thoughts as he realized the boy was already a teenager, about 15 years old. Before Michelle could say anything, the waiter arrived with Catherine's lunch, breaking the moment. Taking advantage of the interruption, Catherine excused herself and joined her son, leaving Michelle lost in his thoughts. Returning to his table with his son and wife, Michelle appeared distant, his mind elsewhere. While Sophie and Austin enjoyed their meals, Michelle seemed preoccupied, his thoughts consumed by a single idea. Could Nathan be his son? Was it possible that Catherine was pregnant when they separated and never told him? But why would she keep it a secret? These questions consumed Michelle, overshadowing his ability to enjoy the present moment. Before he could find answers, Sophie's voice broke through his thoughts, snapping him back to reality. As days passed, Michelle couldn't shake the issue from his mind. He dreaded facing the truth that haunted him. How would Sophie react to learning he had a child from his past marriage? And what about Austin? How would he feel discovering he had an older brother? The idea of confronting Catherine, fearing she might demand financial support, only added to his anxiety. Despite the swirling uncertainties and doubts in his mind, Michelle couldn't ignore the overwhelming curiosity pushing him to uncover the truth. How could this be possible? Michelle questioned himself relentlessly. He was convinced that Catherine was unable to have children, especially after years of failed attempts to conceive together. Michelle's experience with Sophie had been vastly different. A few years after his divorce, he met Sophie, and she soon became pregnant with Austin. Upon hearing the news, they swiftly decided to marry, embarking on a new life together. These contrasting circumstances only deepened Michelle's doubts and confusion about the possibility of Nathan being his son. Michelle found himself caught in a profound internal struggle. On one side, he yearned for the truth, but on the other, he dreaded the potential upheaval in his life if Nathan turned out to be his son. His pride urged him to maintain the facade of a perfect family with Sophie and Austin, convincing himself that Nathan and Catherine's reappearance would only bring chaos and disruption. Yet, Catherine's persistent silence on the matter intrigued him further. Why would she keep Nathan a secret from him? This mystery intensified his curiosity and deepened his doubts. Meanwhile, Sophie began to notice her husband's distant demeanor. Michel always seemed lost in thought, and it concerned her deeply. Determined to uncover the cause of his distress, she confronted him, ready to face whatever truth lay behind his troubled behavior. Feeling trapped and unable to keep his worries to himself any longer, Michel finally opened up to his wife about his suspicions. Sophie was taken aback by Michel's revelations, her eyes widening in disbelief and apprehension. "Do you think Nathan could be your son?" she asked, her voice betraying surprise and uncertainty. Taking a deep breath, Michel mustered the courage to admit his suspicions. "Yes, I believe it's a possibility," he confessed, his voice tinged with doubt. Concern furrowed Sophie's brow. "But Michel, this could turn our lives upside down. Are you sure it's wise to pursue this truth?" she asked, her apprehension evident in her tone. Michel nodded resolutely. "I have to know, Sophie. If Catherine won't tell me the truth, then I'll arrange for a DNA test," he declared firmly, his decision firm and unwavering. "No, Michel, please don't do this," Sophie pleaded, desperation creeping into her voice. "We shouldn't get mixed up in their lives," she reasoned, attempting to sway her husband. "Let's just leave the past where it belongs and focus on our future." Sophie tried everything to dissuade Michel from pursuing the truth, convinced it was best to leave things in the past. She thought she had convinced him, but Michel remained resolute in his determination to uncover the truth. Against Sophie's wishes, Michel decided to contact Catherine and arrange a meeting, determined to seek answers. Catherine was taken aback when Michel reached out to her after their unexpected encounter at the restaurant. She never expected to hear from him again, recalling his arrogance from their past. Initially hesitant, she declined his invitation. However, Michel's persistence eventually persuaded her to agree, albeit reluctantly. "Catherine, there's something important we need to discuss," Michel began, sounding unsure. "It's been weighing on my mind since our meeting at the restaurant. I've been thinking about it a lot lately, and I need to know the truth," he asserted firmly. "What's this about? What do you mean?" Catherine asked, puzzled. "You know exactly what I'm referring to," Michel snapped back. "I'm talking about Nathan. If he's my son, I deserve to know," he declared emphatically. "Oh, so that's why you were so surprised at the restaurant," Catherine chuckled, putting the pieces together. "What's so funny?" Michel demanded. "I deserve to know the truth." "No, Nathan isn't yours," Catherine affirmed, frustrated by Michel's insistence. Unsatisfied, Michel pressed on. "Then whose son is he?" he demanded. "You, a single mom with a 15-year-old son. He has to be mine. I just don't understand how that's possible. You were infertile." "You always jump to conclusions," Catherine shot back, annoyed by Michel's accusations. "Nathan isn't yours. I've already told you he's Gregory's son, my husband's." Michel was taken aback, and Catherine clarified, "Nathan isn't 15. He's tall like my husband, but he's actually just about to turn 14. There's no way he could be your son," Catherine asserted. "After our divorce, I went to see a doctor to figure out why I couldn't conceive and maybe explore treatment options," she explained. "What the doctor told me there was nothing wrong. I was perfectly healthy and capable of getting pregnant. And that's exactly what happened. Once Gregory and I got married, I became pregnant with Nathan, and later on, we had 2 more sons, Evan, who is 10, and Theo, who is 7. After the confrontation with Catherine and the revelation that Nathan wasn't his son, Michel felt deeply intrigued and disturbed. Catherine's words made him question everything he believed about his fertility and his relationship with Sophie. Angry and confused, Michel tried to make sense of it all. He couldn't understand how, coming from a large family, he only had 1 child with Sophie, while Catherine, whom he thought was infertile, had 3 children with her husband. Ultimately, Michel decided to take Catherine's advice and see a doctor. Sophie, thinking she had convinced him to move on from the past, had no idea what Michel was up to, and he couldn't anticipate what he would discover. The medical tests revealed a truth that rocked Michel to his core. He was sterile. This revelation triggered a flood of questions about his marriage to Sophie. How could he have fathered a child with her if he was sterile? This newfound knowledge cast doubt on the very foundation of their relationship. Michelle spent a considerable amount of time lost in thought, contemplating the significance of this revelation and its implications for his life and his marriage to Sophie. He was faced with the daunting task of redefining his identity and role as a husband and father. Amidst the turmoil of this painful discovery, when he confronted Sophie, Michelle was devastated to learn the truth about Austin. She admitted that during the early stages of their relationship, she had a brief affair with another man, resulting in her pregnancy with Austin. The revelation left Michelle utterly shattered, feeling as though his entire life had crumbled around him. His pride and confidence in his fertility had blinded him to the truth for so long. Now he was confronted with a new reality that shook the very core of his beliefs about his marriage and his role as a father. Michelle had to come to terms with this newfound truth. He found himself faced with the daunting task of rebuilding his relationship with Sophie on a foundation of shattered trust. Moreover, he grappled with the emotional challenge of reconciling his feelings towards Austin, knowing he wasn't his biological son but still loving him as his own child. This revelation marked a profound turning point for Michelle, but he understood the necessity of forging ahead and reconstructing his life upon this newfound truth. This narrative underscores the vital role truth plays in fostering healthy and enduring relationships. Honesty, both with oneself and with others, serves as a cornerstone for nurturing mutual trust and respect. Moreover, the story serves as a poignant reminder of the importance of confronting our own biases and egos, which can obscure our perception of reality and hinder our ability to truly see those around us. Have you ever experienced a moment where the revelation of truth completely altered your perspective on something or someone in your life? If you found this story engaging, please consider liking and subscribing to the channel. Feel free to leave a comment with a number from 1 to 5 to indicate your level of appreciation for the narrative. Also, check out the video currently displayed on your screen.